If you've reached terms of settlement and you're not going to save yourself on any transfer duty by having formal terms of settlement drafted by a lawyer, then you might consider not bothering to have a lawyer. And then you're moving on to parenting aspects, and more separated couples, I think, resolve parenting aspects without a lawyer than they do resolve property matters without a lawyer present.
Welcome to Divorce Down Under, the Aussie way, where a regular guy like me, Matt, will help you navigate a fresh start following a divorce. After experiencing a divorce and going through all sorts of emotions, I hope to bring you the right tools and advice so you can set up a better life after divorce. Hear from experts and people like you who have lived it, sharing insights so you may find peace in a new beginning. Hi Luke, welcome to another episode of Divorce Down Under. It's a pleasure to have you join us again. How's your week been?
Yeah, pretty good. Thanks, Matt. Thanks. Always a pleasure to meet up with you and chew the fat. Has been a busy week, and I think we're leading in now, as much as scary as it sounds, because it feels like to me we just started 2024, but the year is quickly evaporating, and we're in the second half of the year, which tends to go so quickly for us, and also get really busy. So this week is probably evidence of what's to come, in the sense that it's getting busier, and there's so many things happening all at once at the moment. So yeah, it has been a really busy week, and I don't expect it's going to be quiet again until we all break for Christmas in what is now only a few months away.
It's a bit like that. And when we try and put aside some of our pleasure time to watch the Olympics, it doesn't leave us much time. But speaking of sports, you're into tennis. Have you managed to get out in the courts of late to sort of give you a bit of that downtime?
Yeah, it is a great spot to forget about all of your daily pressures, I suppose, and good to get out on the court and just put all your focus on that. And I have played twice this week, actually, and 2 nights in a row. So I was feeling it after the second night of tennis. The joints in the body is not what it used to be. So, but it is great to get out there and get a bit of oxygen going through the blood. It does help.
There's a tip for our viewers: get out and get involved in sports and activities, even when you're busy.
Definitely.
So this is your second show. Second time on the show, thank you. And I thought we'd just sort of start back all over again, and maybe before we get underway, share a little bit about yourself again for the viewers that missed your first episode. So, maybe just tell them where you're from, what business you're running, and maybe tell us something we don't know about you, or most don't know about you.
Sure. Well, just as briefly as possible, I was born and bred in Townsville in North Queensland, and probably to reverse the order of your question, something that people don't know about me. Most people don't know about me, I suppose. Growing up as a child, my dad worked for an airline, and so we moved a lot. So I can't remember how many, but I went to countless schools, and grew up in Townsville, Mackay for a little bit, Mount Isa, Hayman Island in the Whitsundays, which was a real treat. Growing up there, and so that was probably the highlight of my primary school years, where we used to we didn't learn a lot, to be honest, but it was such great fun. We used to go, and they had a trolley cart that used to go down the jetty, and so we'd go into the restaurant where all of the staff knew us, and me and a few friends, and we'd get free drinks and jump on the trolley cart, go out and scoop up these tropical fish for our fish tank. So it was that was quite a fun time in life. And then so moving forward now, I finished my law degree in Townsville, and got a job in probably the largest firm in Townsville, and also I think the third longest still running firm in Queensland. So it's got a long history there. That was great to earn my stripes in a well-established organisation like that. And then my wife and our 3 daughters moved to the Sunshine Coast in 2017, and then I opened up Shanahan Family Law the following year in 2018. And so we've been growing bit by bit every year. We're based in Maroochydore at the Contiki Business Centre on Plaza Parade, and it was just me to begin with, but now we've got a team of about 10, and that includes 3 team members who are based at the Gold Coast. So the Gold Coast office is sort of like our satellite office, and the mission is just to continue to grow and to try to help as many people as we possibly can to get through their family law matters, and to do so as quickly and painlessly as possible, which is part of the reason why I started the firm, is really just to I know that family law, and like a lot of litigation, it can drag out for so long. And so my mission, my aim was really, when I started Shanahan Family Law, was to make it so that people weren't going through those long, protracted litigation phases. I think the longer that you stay in that, the worse it is for your mindset, and particularly the relationship between your ex, even though you may not get along. If you've got children, if you've got a child or children with your ex-husband or wife, it's so key or critical that there be some form of relationship and communication between the two, I think. And the chance of that occurring just deteriorates the longer they stay in that litigation phase. So it's very important to be mindful of that as a family lawyer. It's a great responsibility, I think, that comes with the role, and it's not to be treated lightly. I think if there's a message out there that up and coming family lawyers should be mindful of, I think that's it. It's really just to make sure that they realise the gravity of trying to resolve matters as soon as possible, to ensure that, and this is a bit more on a high level now, but I think that if you can help as many separated couples as possible to maintain some civility between them after they've resolved their legal issues, then they and their children benefit from that, and that has a flow-on effect throughout the community. It trickles through, and so the community as a whole, I think, becomes a nicer community to live in, because the family lawyers had a small role in making sure that people maintain relationships. So if you think about it, and I often do, it is a very important role, and it's a great responsibility.
Yeah, I agree. Thanks for sharing that. I actually don't think I knew that about you with regards to the moving around, and it probably explains your adaptability and your tenaciousness to being able to adapt to different environments. So well done.
Yeah, thank you. You could be right.
Yeah, sounds like an interesting childhood. Some of the places you lived in, but I'd like to. That sort of moves on into, it's not always about a family lawyer, and it's not. And what I mean by that is there are instances where you might not necessarily always need a lawyer. And that brings us sort of onto today's topic, where, you're going to talk a little bit about when not to hire a family lawyer, and sort of in your experience, what are some common misconceptions people have about needing legal representation in specifically family matters? And if you have any, can you list any reasons as to why, you think they may not need a lawyer in the circumstances?
Yeah. There's maybe the best way to answer that question is to start with the circumstances where you do need a lawyer, and then working backwards from there. So if you've reached a property settlement with your ex-partner, and that's to divide up all of the assets and liabilities, there's probably two reasons why you should have a lawyer, or at least make sure that a lawyer drafts the terms of settlement for you. One is so that you've got a full and final property settlement. I have seen parties in the past come to us and say, we reached an agreement, we sorted it all, we divided all of the assets and liabilities, and now he or she is saying, I want more because I've recently got an inheritance, or I've got a promotion at work and a high paying role, whatever the circumstance is. And I say to them, how did you document or formalize your agreement when you reached that agreement? And where it's not done in compliance with the requirements of the Family Law Act, it leaves them exposed to a second bite of the cherry, so to speak. So that's a very good reason why you should have a lawyer at least look over your terms of settlement and draft those to make sure that they do comply with the legislation. And also, if you're transferring assets from one party to the other, there may be stamp duty. There usually is stamp duty or transfer duty associated with that. And but there is an exemption that the government grants where the transfer of asset is occurring according to the terms of settlement, which are documented in compliance with the Family Law Act. So that's another good reason why documenting it by a lawyer, or at least having them check over it to make sure it does comply with the legislation, can save you thousands in transfer duty that you would otherwise have to pay.
Can I add to that?
Yeah.
So is it true if someone was submitting, their own, not using a lawyer and submitting their own affidavit to the courts, is it true that the courts can actually knock you back and actually not accept your affidavit to the courts or whatever it is you're applying for?
Yeah, it is. I often say to clients that, submitting the terms of settlement to a court for approval, even though it's being made or being sought to be made by consent of the two parties, the court's not simply there to engage in a rubber stamping exercise. So they're not just going to put their seal and stamp on any document that comes before them. And quite often, it is a jurisdiction that's designed in theory to accommodate self-represented parties so that they can come in and they can square off their own matters without having a lawyer present. And that's a good thing. However, in practice, it's not as easy as that. And there are a lot of legal technicalities that the system, which is designed for self-represented parties, get tripped up on. And the courts will say, once they receive terms of settlement that don't comply with the requirements, they'll send a requisition notice back and say you haven't complied with this, and this, and then it's incumbent. And a lot of the times, I think the parties who receive these requisition notices back may not even understand what's being asked of them. So that's another point, that it isn't a rubber stamping exercise, and the courts will often require certain things to be done, which oftentimes you need legal training to be able to do. So that's a good point. And then I suppose there are staying on property just briefly for a moment. If you've reached terms of settlement and you're not going to save yourself on any transfer duty by having formal terms of settlement drafted by a lawyer, then you might consider not bothering to have a lawyer. That's one circumstance, although you do face that risk that one of the parties may come back for a second bite of the cherry down the track. And then you're moving on to parenting aspects, and this is probably one of the areas where you could really do without a family lawyer, provided there's a reasonable relationship between the parties still. And more separated couples, I think, resolve parenting aspects without a lawyer than they do resolve property matters without a lawyer present. So parenting is definitely one of them, and there's plenty of resources available to people going through a parenting dispute. The family court website has a lot of information on there, which is really good for self-represented parties. There's also community organisations such as Uniting Care and Relationships Australia that provide mediation services for next to nothing to assist parties who haven't quite reached an agreement themselves and need the assistance of an independent third party to assist them. And just briefly, for those who don't know what that process looks like, more often than not these days it's conducted on a shuttle basis, which just means that the two parties they can choose to be in the same room if they wish, and they get along well enough for that. But oftentimes one party will be in one room, the other in another, and the mediator just goes between the two rooms, just shuttles between the two rooms, and if they're good, the mediator's good, they'll put the clients or the parties at ease and gently talk them through each party's perspective till they get to the end of the day, hopefully, or before the end of the day, where they've each party's made some compromises to strike a deal and reach an agreement. But parenting is a funny thing because although it's an area where people have the most likelihood or chance of resolving the matter without the involvement of a family lawyer, it depends, as I said before, on the level of acrimony or cooperation between the parties. Because if it's really heightened and tense between the parties, then and especially if court proceedings have started and one party has a lawyer representing them, it can be disastrous for the other party to go through that litigation process without a lawyer present. So I think it's just about reading the situation and knowing when you can get away with self-representing and when it's really well worth your while to have a lawyer on your side.
Yeah, and I don't think there's always circumstances where you cannot have a lawyer, but instances I've heard stories where, it's getting tighter these days and much better the system, but there have been instances where there've been parents, kids involved. One couple has decided to move interstate. The other couple has accepted that and not realized that thinking that kid will come back to where they're supposed to live, but it doesn't always end up that way because the courts are in favor of where is the child now most comfortable, where is it where is it not going to be disrupted. So there are circumstances where if you aren't aware that another partner can take that child away and that child can now live in that place despite the fact it's home residence being not there, that can be true, can't it? So that's where I find, as much as you don't want a lawyer, I think that's a case where it's really beneficial to get some support or advice of a lawyer. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, that's a really good example, and that's just one of innumerable different situations that might arise where there might be an assumption about how the law operates, and that assumption could come from anywhere. You could have spoken to your brother, or you could have spoken to your friend at work, or anyone, and they say, I've been through the situation, this is how the law operates, and then that creates in you an assumption about how the law operates, and you might sit on your hands in the example that you just gave to your own detriment by not acting swiftly at that particular juncture. You're doing yourself a disservice because you assumed that based on the information that you were given, that you would be okay in that situation. I think it pays. And look, I know that having a lawyer engaged is sometimes costly, but also from a financial perspective, I mean, but also not having a lawyer present as well can be costly as well. If particularly if damage gets done that the lawyer has to come and try to repair later on, and there's a lot more work and effort that's required to go into trying to repair something. Yeah. So my best advice to people who aren't entirely sure, is just to have at least an initial consultation, just to get a bit of an idea about whether the assumption they've got in their head is correct or not. And then that can put their mind at ease a lot of the time. And if their assumption is correct, at least they've gone to the extent of making sure that they're not digging a hole for themselves that they have to come out of later on.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And I think so. If someone says, if I don't need, or if I don't, I guess, want a lawyer for whatever reason, what would you say their options are? I know one of them that comes to mind, if they're not going to go down that lawyer path, that the first thing they need to understand is how to actually submit their cases. And can you talk about that? So for example, you got the ComCourts and so forth.
Yeah. That's so. If you're going to lodge any court documents, then the court website has a lot of resources on there, which is really great for self-represented parties. So if any of the viewers or listeners are going through or about to go through court proceedings and lodging court documents, then do yourself a favour. If you don't have a lawyer, get onto the website and have a look at some of the resources available. They've got a lot of fact sheets on there and guides on how to do things. So that's a great resource. I don't know how good it is, but there's a lot of talk at the moment about ChatGPT and getting answers from that. Of course, Google. You can always do a Google search, and a lot of law practices will routinely publish newsletters or articles which has some valuable information on it as well. We do that. And in fact, for our clients, we've created a premium resource section on our website, which is accessible to our clients, which goes into great detail and provides a lot of information. So that's also a great resource as well, and it cuts down on the fees that our clients have to spend going through those questions with us, because we're supplying that through our website to them at no charge. So
instead of asking those questions to a lawyer, which is going to, generally return in their costs. So yeah, agree.
That's right. Yeah. So it gives them the opportunity to find the answers that they're looking for, and if they're still unclear or they just want to clarify something with us that they found on our premium resources section, then it's still going to be a lot of cost saving there for them, because they've got the information or most of the information without coming to us and having to be charged for the time spent on getting that issue resolved in their mind.
Yeah, I agree. And the thing is, I've actually seen those premium resources. The thing that I like about them is when people are asking the question when not to hire a family lawyer, I guess they're asking the question, do I really need a lawyer? Or in some instances, they need to understand why are they asking that question? Is it from a cost perspective, or is it just because they think they don't like lawyers, or is it because they think they know what they can get through this themselves? So I think it's important that they understand, why is it you're asking yourself that question? And if it is from a cost perspective, there are some parties that are, there seems to be this disparity between male and females, where the males are working full time, and sometimes in instances where the females haven't worked. So they're in this difficult circumstances where costs are the reason for why they're not in a position to hire a family lawyer. But there are options out there, aren't there? If they're in that sort of position where they're not in that necessarily where they can afford a lawyer. Well, they think they can't afford a lawyer because there are assets.
Yeah, there are plenty of options available now these days. For people who, if you take the traditional relationship, for example, and I know that the traditional relationship's changing over time as well, but it's a good example of, for example, one of the parents, typically the father goes out and they become the breadwinner while the mother stays at home and sacrifices her career options in raising the children and maintaining a household. And then after separation occurs, the mother is left in sometimes in a perilous position where, without the same capacity to generate an income as the man in that situation is enjoying, because he's had the support of the mother/wife at home, looking after the household, supporting the children, taking care of the things, taking those things off his plate so that he can generate and build his income earning capacity. They sometimes, I think, come to us and they want to get some advice at the beginning, and they also express their concerns that they don't have funds, and they're worried about how they're going to be going into negotiations with an unequal playing field. And they're relieved to know that there are organisations out there that, to name a few, there's one called Just Fund, there's another Plenty, there's a few different ones out there, and they provide funding for parties like that going through that situation where they don't have the funds to pay a lawyer on a routine basis, to pay legal fees once a month when the lawyer issues the invoice. And so I think that's a great thing. I think that levels the playing field. It enables the party to get proper representation, so that it's not the male in that situation who's got their lawyer, and they're just taking advantage of the poor lady in that situation.
Yeah,
and I say, yeah, that's right. And it's not always. I should be very careful about not coming across as being sexist, because we have had plenty of men in that position as well, who have under new societal norms chosen to raise the family and maintain the household as well. So, just me using that as an example, but it does cut both ways, more so than ever these days.
Yeah, I agree. Good point. And I think just to clarify, to clarify that some more for people trying to understand that that mention of the different funding options. Obviously, there's always legal aid if someone's doesn't have a certain asset amount and they're cash poor, then there is legal aid. But back to the offering of Plenty or Just Funds, what happens is, or my understanding is, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, if there's a house, say, let's say it was valued at $800,000 or $1 million, we're going to split that between, we're going to assume that it's 50-50. So 500 is sort of sitting in one half of with the lady, another 500 is in equity with the male, and that one of the parties, whether it be male or female, can draw down on that with someone like Just Funds, and they're able to fund the services of a lawyer. Is that similar to how it works?
Yeah, that's right. So Just Fund in that situation that you just described would be, or Plenty, or whoever it is, would be really saying that this person, let's say it was the lady. This lady has an entitlement basically at law, and I think that those organisations also have lawyers working internally as well, so they're not relying entirely on the advice that the lawyer representing the party sends across to them. They have their own lawyers, and so they can make an assessment to say, okay, in the example that you just gave.
So we talked briefly about some of the resources that Shanahan Family Law offer to their clients, which actually we're going to be offering something at the end of the show. So stay tuned for that. But are there any other resources or tools that come to mind that will enable someone to determine whether or not they think they need a lawyer?
Well, I mean, apart from the resources that we discussed, I suppose, also another way is to go and see a lawyer and have an initial consult, and I know that to some extent, and I also know that, to some extent, when a party goes to see a lawyer and says, "Do I need a lawyer?" that there might be a biased answer that comes back and says, yes, you need
Yeah.
us. We're providing you with invaluable sort of services that you require. And it can be daunting, I think, for people who aren't trained in the law to go to a lawyer for the very first time. They don't know what to expect. They may have never seen a lawyer before, and they're a little bit cautious and worried. And so I think that my tip there would be, if you're going to see a lawyer, I think go by gut feel is a big thing in my mind, because it doesn't happen very often, but there are sometimes, and you know, these are the ones that perpetuate the bad reputation for lawyers. There are some, and I should reiterate, it doesn't happen often, but there are lawyers out there who don't have the foresight to be aware that having people in a fragile emotional state, the lawyer driving as quickly as possible a resolution in the matter, and they just don't seem to understand the damage that can occur if that matter is not resolved really quickly. And so I think we might have touched on this last time that we did a podcast together, where we were talking about hourly rates and talking about how there might be law firms out there that charge you a really low hourly rate, and that might seem appealing to someone who's just checking around to see prices and wondering which way to go. But if that lawyer doesn't have the understanding or foresight that you need to get in and resolve matters quickly, then the hourly rate doesn't mean a whole lot, because if it's taking them 2 times or 3 times as long to resolve that matter, then they end up paying more in costs, which is against the whole reason why they probably went with that lawyer in the first place. So I think that my tip there would be, you know, do some research, have a look on the website for the family court, and also you might like to go and see a lawyer as well and get some preliminary advice. And most people are pretty good intuitively, I think, where they'll know once they meet with a lawyer whether they can connect with them, whether they can build rapport, whether they feel like the lawyer cares about their case and cares about their best interest as well, and also not just telling the client what they want to hear. I think that it's another thing to bear in mind as well. If you're not legally trained, if you go to see a lawyer that is really not challenging you on any of your beliefs or assumptions, and is just really agreeing with everything as well that you're saying, you have to be aware of that as well, because it might feel like this person's on my side, they understand me, but it's important to be reality tested as well. That's part of the role of the lawyer. They have to make sure that the client is seeing things from all angles, not just their own perspective, which can sometimes be, you know, tunnel vision, especially when you're in that highly emotive state after separation. Your head's all over the place, and it's really difficult to focus for some of our clients. So it is something to be aware of, and I don't think a lot of people even contemplate that, you know, when they're going to see a lawyer, that if they've come out of the initial consultation and the lawyer has just agreed with everything that they've said, I don't think it goes through a lot of people's minds that could be a problem down the track.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you need to understand, or at least the person looking for it needs to understand, that unfortunately some lawyers will just take on anyone, no matter what. And I think it's good for them to come away from things like the consultations and to be, you know, understanding, is the firm, you know, well known? Is, you know, what are their reviews like online? Are they a bit off? Do they struggle to retain clients? And if you think about it, if a firm's struggling to retain clients, they're going to want your business no matter what. And are they, like you mentioned, are they agreeing with everything you say? I think, you know, that's okay if everything you say is correct, but I think they're things you need to be aware of. So they're good points. And one thing I mentioned, there's a, you know, if someone's going down the route of wanting to do it themselves, I think it's really important that you understand the law.
Mm.
It's going to make the process much easier for you if you're going to be, applying using ComCourts. But I think it's called the Family Law Book Resources online. I don't know that there's a URL there. That's quite in depth, and that has everything to do with family law. That's another resource tool that people can use as well.
Yeah,
to
it's
get
a
them
great
through.
resource. It is a great resource, and also, one other thing I hadn't considered as well before is that we often get clients who, for one reason or another, even despite the availability of Just Fund or Plenty and those other organisations, they just simply can't afford to retain us. So we sometimes, with different clients, we act as a shadow lawyer in the background. So we're not on the record. We're not chewing up costs in going back and forth with the other party or their lawyer. We're advising in the background, and that's a great way as well to keep costs down for some of our clients.
Yeah, especially if someone is a bit more cost focused.
Mm.
Thank you, Luke. I appreciate your time today. But before we go, as you know, and I'm going to get you to hold your question to the very end, so no need to come up with a question yet. But we obviously ask a question from each of our guests online, and I've got a question myself actually for you this time, not from the previous guests we've had on, but you're someone that actually invests in your own personal development, and I wanted to know, can you offer the audience any general advice on how they can overcome, and manage stress in their life? Because, you're in a high pressure environment yourself. And I know one thing you do focus on is your own personal development. Is there anything you can talk about there that might help the audience with regards to personal development?
Yeah, it's a subject that I could probably talk all day on, but just as briefly as I can, I think that one thing that really resonates with me at the moment is win your morning, and what I mean by that is that if you can start each day in a positive mind frame, it goes. I think that window at the start when you first wake up, it's a really critical window to frame the whole day. So if you can win that part, and I'm using an app at the moment called Miracle Morning, which goes through different exercises to help you to win your morning, so that you as the saying goes, win your morning, you win the day, you win the week, you win the month, and so on. And so I think that it all starts with your mindset in the morning, and I often listen to motivational speakers on YouTube as well. I find that's really, really helpful. And accomplishing goals, so setting goals, writing them down, and even if they're small goals. I think it's David Goggins. It says, make your bed each morning. Just that simple act and the visual proof that you've just accomplished something is a stepping stone for the next goal. So there's power in that. I think that if you're in a tumultuous headspace, like a lot of our clients are, I think just setting very basic routine habits that enable you to feel as though you're ticking boxes, you're getting things done, that you're productive. It releases the right chemicals, I think, in your body to get your mindset in the right place. So that'd be my tip for the day.
Nice one. So that was the Miracle Morning, and is that by Hal Elrod?
Yes, that's the one.
We'll share those in the notes of this show. I'll also add to that one, and I'm glad you mentioned having a list, because I learnt this I've talked about it in the previous episodes. Andy Frisella, he calls it the power list. And instead of having 20 goals, 20 lists for the day, you really keep it simple to 5 to 7. And they can be as simple as getting up at 4:30, getting up at 5 o'clock, 6 or whatever it is, making a bed. And once you've done that for a certain number of months, you can then scrub that off the list and move on to another smaller task. So I'm glad you said that. It looks like I'm on the right track then. Thank you again, Luke. So what I'm going to do, I believe you actually have an offer for the audience, and all they need to do is subscribe to the show firstly. And if they send an email to support@divorcedownunder.com.au, the first 5 people that email will get access to your premium resources that you talked about. We'll show those in the video itself as well. And thank you,
That's
Luke,
right. That's right.
for giving
Yeah.
you access.
No, my pleasure. My pleasure. I think there's a lot of great content in there, and so always a pleasure to be on Divorce Down Under. I love your work, Matt. Keep doing what you're doing best, and for those listening or watching, jump on and contact Matt, because I'd love to be able to share with those people who get in quickly access to our premium resources. I think that there's a lot of great stuff in there that can be accessed for those who jump in. And in terms of my query, my question, I would love. I know you've got a broad range of people that you speak with on your show, and I think for those of your listeners and viewers that are going through property division, part of the advice that we can't provide as a family lawyer is advice around capital gains tax. I think that financial advisors and planners and accountants and valuers as well are qualified to give that advice, and we know about the ins and outs of it all, but we're just prohibited from giving that advice. But I think that's really an area that a lot of your listeners would benefit from, just getting some of the ins and outs of capital gains tax, when it applies, when it doesn't apply, and whether it will impact them if they're going through a property settlement.
That's a great idea. And there's an idea for our next host, our next guest.
Yeah.
We'll have to look at that. But thanks again, Luke. I won't hold you up. I know you're extremely busy, being a Thursday, and you've got Friday and then the weekend. But I appreciate you for being on the show. And until next time, we'll see you around.
Pleasure. Thanks, Matt. Have a great week.
Thanks, Luke. Bye for now.
Bye now.
Thank you for listening to Divorce Down Under, the Aussie Way, helping you navigate a fresh start after divorce. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please leave a review from wherever you are watching or listening, and don't forget to share this with your friends. Also, let us know what you want to hear in future episodes. See you next time for a new episode of Divorce Down Under.